Hey guys, so Raymond Suba here, talking about Filipino martial arts, self-defense in general, and maybe even a lot about Filipino culture. So last video I talked a little bit about my idea of in where the information of martial arts or come from. All right, so I established that it comes from number one, a living tradition, and number two, it also comes from documentary evidence or documented manuals. Okay. Just as a quick clarification, I didn't think I mentioned it in my last video, but training videos would be included in documented sources of martial arts. Because it's not a personal one-on-one kind of teaching thing. Just a clarification. So today what I want to talk about in this video is what does it mean? Why is it important to know this? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the opposite extreme, which I admit I don't know too much about, although it's one of my like side interests, and which is HEMA or Historical European Martial Arts. Okay. They're in the other end of the spectrum, away from us. So this is going to be a short video. But they do primarily a lot of training based off of these manuals. Now, some of them, I think a lot of these guys come from other martial arts or other martial traditions, like for example, European fencing, sport fencing, or even traditional Japanese martial arts, and then they moved on to historical European martial arts. Okay, that's typically the kind of profile that you see with a lot of the guys who practice it. Although now it's becoming more common to have people who started with historical European martial arts from the get-go. Okay, now I was talking today. I want to talk about why it's important to know the source of the information. Well, the source of information does imply heavily the kind of training that you do or the kind of mindset behind the training that you do. I mean, even with the name Historical European Martial Arts. So their interest is primarily with history. Of course they want to have a living connection to history. It's not just like reading it from a book. But the primary purpose here is for them to find out how they used to fight in the old days. And you really do see that in what they do, how they practice. Like, for example, long sword, spear, halberds, sword and shield, good grief, full plate armor. I love all those things. I love watching videos about those. Don't get me wrong. But it has very little to do with modern life, with our current existence. It's more interested in about recreating how fighting was done in the old days, which isn't bad. That's a wonderful project if you ask me. Um, so could there be a historical European martial arts or HEMA group that is more interested in using these principles and techniques that you learn from historical European martial arts and applying it to the modern context? Undoubtedly, there would be probably one or two guys. If there aren't any people there, well, you're welcome to the idea, have fun with it, like historical European martial arts self-defense. And there are some historical stuff that is close enough to modern times for it to be useful. Like, if I remember correctly, Bartitsu, I think was it, which is, and it's very interesting for me to look at their manuals where the guys are actually wearing like civilian clothes, which is actually a wonderful concept if you ask me. Topic for a future video. Um, but yeah, that's primarily the focus, historical accuracy. Okay? But then again, so what does that mean for you as an Arnis practitioner? So when you're talking to people who have a very strong documented martial art, and you get into the discussion, don't be too hung up about it. Like sometimes the conversation would go, oh well, your Filipino martial art doesn't really know how to handle plate armor and stuff like that and fighting in formation. Of course not. Don't be hung up about it. Really, in the Philippines, we never fought that way. We hardly ever fought anyone who had full plate. I mean, the closest was the not conquistadors, but the Spaniards, primarily Castilian, not Spaniards. Mm. Topic for a future video. But yeah, we didn't really fight people with heavy plate, like the Iron Men of Europe and England, steel from head to toe. We never really had to fight those guys, historically speaking. And honestly, since we are primarily a living tradition, we don't really care right now because we don't encounter people who fight in full plate. It's an interesting mental exercise for us, but we're not really too hung up about it. And if you are with people who say, oh, well, in traditional Japanese martial arts, they teach you how to fight against a guy on horseback. I mean, hey, good job. Maybe that's amazing, but not really that useful for us. And that's one of the differences between people who are more historically minded compared to people who are more current minded, I suppose. Is that, hey, if I can't use it right now, it's fine, it's fantastic, but not exactly my priority. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the rest of this for another video where I talk about the pros and cons of the living tradition. And after that, I'll maybe talk about that unique little sweet spot where you have the two things. Alright, so I hope this has been informative, and this is Raymond Suba. I hope you have a good day.